Hello. I've carried a story inside me. A story of love, of loss, of a betrayal so deep it reshaped the very bedrock of my life. It's a story about family, about legacy, and about the terrifying, liberating power of a single truth. This isn't just a story about money, though a great deal of it was involved. It's a story about words. The words in a will. The words on a forged document. And most importantly, the words left on a voicemail, spoken by a voice I thought I'd never hear again, in the deep, silent hours before the dawn. My name, for the purposes of our time together, is Clara. And this is what happened. My father, Arthur, was a self-made man. He built his business, a manufacturing firm, from a literal garage into an empire. He was formidable, brilliant, with a laugh that could shake a room. My mother was his anchor, his quiet, steady counterpart. And then there was us. Me, Clara, the eldest, the one who followed him into the business, learning it from the ground up. And my brother, David, for years my junior. David was different. Charming, yes. Effortlessly so. But where I saw the business as a living, breathing entity, a testament to our father's soul, David saw only an obstacle between him and the life he felt he deserved. He was creative, he said, unburdened by convention. He clashed with Dad constantly. Where I stayed local, building my life and my career close to home, David fled to the coast the moment he could, pursuing a series of ever more ambitious, ever less profitable ventures in film and music. He'd appear for holidays, a little more polished, a little more distant each time, his charm now feeling like a performance. The phone calls for money became a dreaded rhythm. Then my mother passed. It was a fracture in the universe. Dad retreated into himself, into his work. I became his confidant, his partner in everything. We grieved together. We worked together. We spoke every single day. David came home for the funeral, stayed a week, and left again. His calls thereafter were brief, obligatory. The distance wasn't just geographical, it was a canyon. And then the accident. Dad was found at the bottom of the main staircase in the old family home. A fall, they said. At his age, with his heart, it was tragic, but plausible. I was shattered. The pillar of my world was gone. But even in my grief, I had a small, cold comfort. I knew his wishes. We had talked about them often. He was a meticulous man. His will was straightforward. The business would be mine to steward and run. The estate, the investments would be divided, a larger portion to me for my role and my presence, but a significant, more than generous trust established for David, to keep him secure without giving him the keys to the kingdom he'd scorned. Or so I thought. The reading of the will was held in the oak-paneled office of our longtime family attorney, Mr. Henderson, a man who dandled me on his knee. David flew in, dressed in a suit that cost more than his last 5 years of declared income. He was solemn, subdued. I reached for his hand. He let me hold it, but it was limp cold. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, put on his glasses, and began to read. And within minutes, the room turned to ice. The document stated in clear, cold legalese that in light of my estrangement and demonstrated inability to manage complex affairs, and in recognition of David's loyalty and sound judgment, the entirety of my father's estate, the business, the properties, the holdings, was to be transferred to David. A small, one-time lump sum was allotted to me, described as a final bequest to ensure a transition to independent living. I remember the sound that came out of me wasn't a scream. It was a short, sharp gasp, as if I'd been punched. I looked at David. He was staring at the document, his face a mask of what I first mistook for shock. But his eyes were not surprised. They were calculating, assessing. "There's been a mistake," I whispered. Mr. Henderson would not meet my gaze. "The document is notarized and witnessed, Clara. It was executed 6 weeks ago. It supersedes all prior versions." 6 weeks ago? But he was already having the dizzy spells then. He was on medication. His competency was certified by his physician for the purposes of the execution, Henderson said, his voice a monotone. I looked at David again. You knew. He finally looked at me, and the mask slipped, just for a second. In that second, I didn't see my brother. I saw a stranger. A triumphant one. Clara, please. This is as difficult for me as it is for you. But Dad finally saw things clearly. I stood up, my legs trembling. This is not his will. This is not what he wanted. It's his signature, David said softly, holding up a photocopied page. And it was. It was my father's looping, firm signature. But something about it, it was like a perfect forgery of a song you know by heart. The notes are all right, but the music is wrong. I left that office a ghost. The business I had helped build, the home I had cared for Dad in, my financial security, my very history, all of it gone. Handed to a man who hadn't set foot in our town in 5 years. In the weeks that followed, I was paralyzed. Grief upon betrayal upon utter dispossession. My friends, my few remaining family, they all said the same thing. Clara, you have to move on. It's what your father wanted. You'll only destroy yourself fighting it. Let it go. And part of me wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to just lie down and let the numbness take me. But I couldn't. Because of the voicemail. You see, the night before he died, Dad called me. It was late, past 11. I was asleep, my phone on silent. He didn't leave a message the first time. He called again 20 minutes later. This time he left one. Clarabelle. It's me. Sorry it's late. I had a strange visit today. From that new fellow. The lawyer David's so keen on. Sharp suit, cold eyes. Wanted me to sign some supplementary papers. Housekeeping, he called it. I told him I'd run it by Henderson first. He got quite insistent. Don't like it. Don't like the feel of it. David's been different lately. Too eager. Something's not right, my girl. I'm going to sort it out tomorrow. I'll call Henderson first thing. Don't you worry. I wanted to hear your voice. I'll talk to you in the morning. I love you. I'll talk to you in the morning. But by morning he was gone. The police called it an accident. A tragic fall. But I heard his voice. The confusion, the suspicion, the dawning fear. Not fear for his safety, but fear of a wrongness he couldn't yet name. Something's not right, my girl. That voicemail was my father's last testament. It was the key. And it told me, with absolute clarity, that the will read by Mr. Henderson was a lie. So, I stopped being a ghost. I became a detective. It started with the new fellow. It wasn't hard to find him. An attorney named Merrick, with a flashy practice in the city where David lived. He specialized in estate optimization and high-net-worth clients. I was a coward, Clara. I am so profoundly sorry. The betrayal was everywhere. But it was all circumstantial. A good lawyer, a lawyer like Merrick, could explain it all away. A grieving son seeking new advice. An old attorney being replaced. A father having a late-in-life change of heart. Influenced by a dynamic new counsel. The voicemail? The ramblings of a tired, confused old man. I needed more. I needed the source. And Gwen found it. She traced payments from Merrick's firm back to an account in the Caribbean. And that account had made a series of payments to a digital forensics company. And to a private nurse. A private nurse. Dad had refused round-the-clock care. He valued his independence. But according to his pharmacy records, in his final month, he had been prescribed a new, powerful sedative for sleep. The prescribing doctor? The same disgraced one. The nurse, we discovered, had been hired by David under the guise of a wellness consultant to check in on Dad a few times a week. She had access. She had opportunity. The night Dad died, His security system logs showed a temporary bypass of the staircase motion sensor between 1:15 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. It was logged as a system test. Initiated remotely from an IP address registered to a shell company owned by Merrick's firm. It wasn't an accident. It was a quiet, careful murder. Make an old, sedated man disoriented. Create a fall. And inherit a kingdom. I had the evidence. A timeline of fraud, forgery, and with the security logs and the nurse's testimony, which Gwen eventually secured through a combination of pressure and offer of immunity, we could strongly suggest manslaughter, at the very least. I went to the district attorney. It took months. But with the dossier we'd compiled, they opened an investigation. It made the news, of course. Local tycoon's death now suspected foul play. Son and attorney implicated in inheritance scandal. The wheels of justice began to turn, slowly, inexorably. David and Merrick were arrested. The business was frozen in a labyrinth of litigation. I had won. I had uncovered the truth. But the story wasn't over. In the chaos of the criminal investigation, as they combed through decades of records, something else surfaced. Something that reached back into the very foundations of my life. They found a series of old letters, hidden in a safe deposit box my father had kept under a childhood nickname of mine. Letters between my father and a woman who was not my mother. Letters speaking of a love affair, brief but intense, that had occurred in the early years of my parents' marriage. And they spoke of a child, a son, born a year before David. This child, the letters revealed, had been given up for adoption at my father's insistence, to protect his young business and his reputation. The mother had agreed with a substantial, secret financial settlement. My father had carried this guilt, this secret, for his entire life. He had provided for the woman discreetly always. But he had never acknowledged the boy. That boy, now a man, had spent a lifetime feeling a nameless absence. And in his late 40s, he had gone looking. He had hired a private investigator. And that investigator had found him. And had found David. David had known. For years, he had known he had an older half-brother. A secret heir. A ghost who could, if he ever came forward, claim a share of the legacy David believed was solely his. David hadn't just been motivated by greed. He'd been motivated by a secret. A fear of being displaced. Of having his already tenuous claim diluted. He saw our father's guilt over this secret as a weakness, and my closeness to Dad as a threat. His entire life of detachment, of resentment, took on a new, horrifying shape. He wasn't just the estranged son. He was the son guarding his fragile kingdom from a phantom. And he had used that knowledge. When the half-brother, a man named Thomas, finally made tentative contact, David intercepted it. He met him. He didn't reveal who he was at first. He presented himself as a family advisor. And he fed Thomas a story. He said that Arthur was a cruel, withholding man. That the family was toxic. That the only one who had any power was Clara, me, and that I was ruthless. That I would destroy anyone who threatened my inheritance. He told Thomas that if he wanted any recognition, any piece of what he was owed, he would need powerful, discreet help. And he introduced him to Merrick. Thomas, wounded and angry, believing David to be a sympathetic ally, agreed to let Merrick represent his potential claim. He signed papers. He had no idea that those papers were being used as a backdrop, a shadowy threat David could wave at my father. See? The past is coming back. You need a new, stronger will to protect the family from scandal, from this interloper. You need to consolidate everything with the son who is here, who is loyal, who can fight this battle. My father, in his guilt and confusion, besieged by this manufactured crisis, vulnerable from medication and manipulation, was slowly, carefully steered towards his own destruction. The betrayal wasn't just for the future. It was anchored in a secret past, a sin of my father's that David weaponized. When I learned this, the world didn't just spin. It shattered and reassembled into a uglier, more complicated shape. My father was not the flawless pillar I remembered. He was a man who had made a terrible, human mistake and spent a lifetime atoning for it in silence. David wasn't just a greedy monster. He was a wounded, terrified boy who had found a terrible answer to his fear of being replaced. And I was the daughter in the middle, the one who had built her life on a love that was real, but on a story that was incomplete. So I stood at the precipice of my choice. I had the power to expose it all. The forgery, the fraud, the manipulation leading to death. And the ancient affair, the secret brother, the whole tawdry human tragedy of it. I could drag it all into the blinding light of a courtroom. I could destroy David and Merrick utterly. I could reclaim my inheritance. But at what cost? My father's name would be mud. His infidelity, his abandonment of a child, would become public spectacle. The business he built, the legacy of hard work and integrity, would be forever remembered for this scandal. My mother's memory would be tarnished by the revelation of his early betrayal. Thomas, an innocent in so much of this, would have his private pain and origins splashed across headlines. And the family, what was left of it, would be atomized, its remains picked over by the vultures of the media. The other path was to settle, to make a quiet deal. The criminal case would proceed. I would not stop that. A man had died. But the civil suit, the fight over the estate, I could drop it. I could negotiate. David, facing prison, was desperate to deal. I could secure the business, the core of my life's work. I could provide for Thomas, acknowledging him, building a relationship away from the cameras. I could protect my parents' public memory, allowing the good they did, the love they ultimately shared, to be their epitaph. It was the choice between truth and legacy, between justice and peace. I chose peace. Not the peace of surrender, not the peace of silence, but the peace of containment. The peace of drawing a boundary around the poison so it wouldn't infect every memory, every good thing that had come before. I took back the business. I settled the estate on my terms, with a substantial, private trust for Thomas, who wanted no part of the spotlight or the family drama, only acknowledgement and a chance to know his roots quietly. David was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and manslaughter. Merrick was convicted on a wider range of charges. They are both in prison, where they will remain for a very long time. The public story became a tragic case of elder fraud and a fatal accident, masterminded by a corrupt attorney and a selfish son. The deeper, older wounds remained private. Some would say I let David off too easy, that I was complicit in a cover-up. Perhaps. But I learned that the whole, unvarnished truth is a weapon that destroys everything it touches, innocent and guilty alike. And sometimes the harder, braver thing is not to expose, but to heal. To take what is shattered and see what can be salvaged, what can be rebuilt into something strong enough to bear the weight of a complicated, painful history. The voicemail. I still have it. I don't listen to it often, but I keep it. It is my reminder, not just of the lie, but of the love in his voice when he said, "I love you." That was real. That was the truest part of him. In the end, I chose to protect the man who said that, flaws and all, rather than immortalize the victim of the plot that killed him. My life is different now. The business is thriving. I have a relationship with Thomas. It's cautious, tender, like nurturing a plant that grew in the dark. We are both finding our way. And so, I tell you this story not as a cautionary tale about greed, though it is that. Not as a mystery, though it is that too. I tell it as a story about the stories we tell ourselves about our families. They are never simple. They are never clean. They are tapestries woven with threads of love and weakness, loyalty and sin, courage and terrible fear. If you take anything from my story, take this. Listen to the whispers. The ones in the voicemails, yes. But also the whispers in your own heart when something doesn't feel right. Question the surfaces. But also know that when you dig, you may find more than you bargained for. And you will then be faced with the most human of choices. What to do with the broken pieces? You must decide what kind of truth will let you sleep at night. For me, it was a truth bounded by mercy. A truth that allowed for love to still exist, even after everything. Thank you for listening. For bearing witness. It means more than you know. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.